After all, we've been taught that a real man is the Marlboro man, the strong, silent type that, suffers in silence.
Right. The old saying, shut up or I'll give you something to cry about.
Right. There you go. And that's so toxic from the standpoint of our own mental health and our own well-being, of being able to say, I really feel this. And where do I feel this? And this dichotomy between the noise that comes out of our brain versus what we're feeling in our body is something that we don't think about. We don't take that into account because what comes out of our head is so loud.
I'm Art Blanchford, and this is Life in Transition. Welcome back to the Life in Transition podcast. Very excited today to have with us Michael Kay, who is founder of Chapter X, helping people transition to life after career. Michael, I'm really excited to have you here. Welcome to the Life in Transition podcast.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure to be here. And, this is a topic that is close to my heart, mainly because we all go through these transitions and we all, for the most part, we all struggle and we all kind of don't see that next step. It's like it's walking off the cliff and hoping there's a net there or something, right?
Right. So jumping in, Michael, what would you consider to be the most meaningful transition that you have been through in your life?
Oh, wow. I've been through, I look back, I see all the transitions along the way and growing up and education and music and business and creating business and all that stuff. I think this transition from career to post-career was really the most meaningful because I really had to, it was that moment where, when you're working, you know what your goal is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then that transition into what's next is what is next. And it is really, it's so important because this, we're not on the, we're not young. We're not in our 20s and 30s. We have, gone through our career and now we have this, what's important to us for this next chapter in our life. And so it's big, it's huge.
Yeah, no doubt. And two things jumped out at me there, what you said, and I liked what you said that post-career, you didn't use the word retirement because I think that's a little bit of a misnomer these days. But post-career, like what are we going to be about next?
Yeah.
And then listening between the lines there, it sounds like because for you, it was maybe such a significant transition because the identity, when you have these goals and you're identified by what you do, if you're not doing that anymore, if you don't have that title, if you don't have that position, if you don't have that power and that place to go to every day, it can be an identity crisis for a lot of people.
Oh, for sure. Who am I when I'm no longer my job? And in my former life as a financial life planner, working with clients who, professionals, executives, whatever, and this was their life. This consumed them, the attorneys, the doctors, the corporate executives, the business owners. And this is what consumed them for the last, 40 years or more of their lives. And now it's like, okay, well, who am I? And it's this crisis of identity, this crisis of meaning, of purpose, of, because if we think about it, when we're young and we're being aimed towards success and we're aimed towards achievement and we're aimed towards, living a life that is important to us, whether it's supporting a family, whatever those things are, building a business,
right,
rising to the top. Now that's done. Now what?
So how did you navigate that for yourself? If this was the biggest transition for your most meaningful transition, how did you navigate that for yourself?
To kind of tell the story a little bit is that because so much of my work was involving working with clients in terms of what their retirement looks like or what their post-career life was like. And I heard everything from, oh, I'm going to play golf,
right,
to, I'll figure it out. Or, I remember one great story with a business owner. And when we had this conversation, what are you going to do? What does your life look like when you transition out of your business? And he said, "Oh, I'm just going to play golf." And his wife turned to him and said, "No, you're not." She says, "You're going to get a part-time job and work 2 days a week. You're going to volunteer 2 days a week. Um, you can play golf 2 days a week. And the seventh day will be a wild card." And he looked at her and he goes, "Okay." Because just think about it. We don't think about these things. And so many people, and I'll go back to my story. So many people, I've heard them talk about, well, I don't have any outside interests. Well, it's not surprising because they've worked 80-hour weeks.
Yeah, if
right?
that's all they've done. That's all they know.
Right,
and that's the
right.
only muscle they've developed, right?
Exactly. It's like, yeah, of course you don't. Why? When would you have the time to even think about it? So in my story, I really thought I had it nailed. I make sure, the financial aspect of my life was secure. I thought about things that I wanted to do, and I created, as I became a certified life coach, as I was transitioning, and I created Chapter X and the podcast and the writing and things like that. And it was very satisfying. And then about 3 or 4 months in, uh, I tanked. I just hit the wall, and I just felt awful. I felt sad. I was depressed. I was despondent. I'm like, and I didn't understand why. It wasn't like I wasn't engaged. But what I realized, and I wrote about it to the Chapter X community. I opened up my veins and bled out on the page, because I felt like it was important to share. And between the support that I got from my family and the men in Chapter X and others, it really helped, because what I realized is I really hadn't mourned or grieved the loss of this business that I had built from nothing, from scratch, having developed a practice with advisors in various locations in the country, a fee-only model, just what I considered to be, and many considered to be, best of class in the financial planning space. But I really didn't grieve it. I walked away and changed my direction to put my energies there. And I didn't give myself the time to go, wow, this is hard. There was no, send off. It was just post COVID. It was just like, okay, here's the keys to, I had transferred ownership to my partner, a younger partner, and had, with all the faith in the world that he would do a great job, and by all aspects he is. But I didn't give myself that space and time. And once I did, it became okay. It became, I feel like I healed from that.
So take us in a little bit deeper on that. So you said, I didn't give myself the space and time. So was it really just to acknowledge the sadness, the loss, the grief of this big part of what you had built? Or was it the identity? Was it wanting to do something like that again? And how did that make it? Like, how did that? So two parts. Like, what was it, and how did that make it okay?
Yeah, it wasn't like, okay, I'd like to continue doing this, because I had realized that in my work with clients, that, and dealing with a lot of very deep, really emotional issues of how they feel about money.
Sure.
We all have our money history.
Yeah.
And what I discovered was my level of engagement, because there was nothing new. I'd been through this hundreds of times, the same stories, and I didn't feel like I was being challenged. So it wasn't for me like, I want to go back and do this again. I feel like I put a exclamation point at the end of that sentence. I think I was a really good planner. I think I really helped people, but I didn't want to do it again.
Right.
But I think it was really that idea that all this work and effort and trials and failures and successes and focus on trying to bring the best that I could possibly imagine to clients was now gone.
Mhm.
So that which I had built was now,
So this
take
North
the
Star, this that had propelled you for quite some time, was
sure.
gone,
Yeah, it was
and
gone.
now there was a void. There was
Right.
a vacuum.
Right. And it was like I just didn't kind of come to grips with that. But once I did, I feel I was able to heal and actually become a more sensitive and more available coach and mentor and friend to people, because I think I had a deeper understanding of the pain. I had a client who had to retire based on an agreement with his partners. He was an oral surgeon, and we had worked for years preparing for his exit. And we had lined all the things he was going to do, all the activities, all the things he was interested in. And 6 months later, he was back in my office, and they said that he was working part time. He was working, filling in for other doctors who were going on vacation or were sick or whatever. And I said, what motivated that? And he goes, Michael, I've been a doctor all my life. I don't want to be a mister. And that, that awareness of, it's like that identity,
Right.
so it's so for me in my story, it wasn't about identity, because I feel like I put a period at the end of the sentence.
Right.
But for many, there is that identity issue. For me, it was the creation was gone.
For that type of creation, for that type of business.
Exactly.
And so how did you grieve that? How did you give yourself permission to grieve that and let that go? What would that look like if somebody else is going through that?
I really kind of delved deeply into it. And I spent a lot of time writing, journaling, talking, listening, and doing a lot of reflecting on where was the ache. I really tried to feel, was this ache in my head? Was it in my heart? Where was that ache? Where was that feeling? And a lot of it was in my head, because I knew in my heart that I was ready to go.
Okay.
So a lot of it was this self-talk in my head, like this thing that you had imagined, that you had envisioned, that you had birthed, is now been ripped away from you.
Yeah, it's no longer yours.
Right. And I think that realization that it was just this talk in my head, and that where was the energy for me in my body was in what I had created in chapter X, and trying to bring that out to more, to bring it out to other people and more groups and things like that, to be able to help them through this.
Right. Right. So it was really a very strong, like, intellectual loss, that this was the pattern. This was where your mental faculties were used and engaged, and
Yeah,
letting go of that was more difficult than you thought.
exactly. I hadn't prepared for that. I didn't even conceive of it. It snuck up on me.
Yeah, and I think it's fair to say, after a career, especially if it's a business that you built yourself and had a lot of passion for, that it's definitely a loss. Even if it's what you want to do, it's still a loss, and it's still a phase. I mean, if you're going through empty nest, it's what you want. You want your kids to grow up and fly, but it's still a loss. It's still the closing of a chapter.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's really important that we give ourselves permission to feel all the feelings that come with that. I mean, nobody would say, "Oh, well, you're getting divorced. There's no, you're moving on to something better, and you shouldn't grieve that loss." No, you'd have the permission to grieve that loss, even if it is something better, even if it is something a bad situation that you need to get out of.
Right. I remember when we dropped our daughter off at college on first year, and she's our oldest, and dropped her off at college. My wife and I are driving back, and we probably got about 15 minutes away from the campus, and both of us burst into tears.
Sure.
That acknowledgement, like, wow, this is real.
Right. And it's something you very much want, but it still doesn't change the fact that you're grieving a closing and a loss of a chapter, of a loss of something, right?
And I think men especially are put themselves in a box where they don't give themselves permission to really feel these things and to really explore them. Because after all, we've been taught, that a real man is the Marlboro man, the strong, silent type that, suffers in silence. And,
right. The old saying, shut up or I'll give you something to cry about.
Right. There you go. And that's so toxic from the standpoint of our own mental health and our own well-being, of being able to say, I really feel this. And where do I feel this?
Yeah, absolutely.
And this dichotomy between the noise that comes out of our brain versus what we're feeling in our body is something that we don't think about. We don't take that into account because the what comes out of our head is so loud.
This episode of the Life in Transition podcast is brought to you by MidLife Transition Mastery. If you have reached midlife and you are successful, you have checked all the boxes, you've done everything you thought you should do, and especially pleasing everybody else, doing what you think everyone else needs you to do, but you still feel like something's missing, like you're coming up empty, feeling alone, feeling misguided or lost. MidLife Transition Mastery Explorer community is for you. Here we will build authentic community. We will learn about the 8 steps to mastering midlife transition, and we will learn and execute living life with no regrets in our second half. Please check out the community on lifeintransition.online/MLTM, Midlife Transition Mastery. And I look forward to seeing you around the fire in this community. Part of my morning practices that I've been doing for 4 years, is checking in with what am I feeling right now? Where am I feeling it in my body? Yeah. And who's feeling it? Like what part of me is feeling that? And then to let, what does it want to say? What does it want to do? What does it want to express, right? To give a voice to those feelings that maybe haven't been allowed to have one for a long time.
Yeah.
Right?
And society doesn't really hasn't given men permission to say, I feel sad. I feel depressed. I feel this way. I feel that way. And why do I feel this way? And exploring it and kind of leaning into whatever it is where we are in that particular day.
Yeah. And to recognize that's, you said society doesn't give us permission. That's true. We have to give ourselves permission, right? As we mature and grow and learn for ourselves, we have to give ourselves permission.
For sure.
There's this great app, and I'm trying to remember what it's called right here, but I think it's called How We Feel. It's a free app that's really great. It's sponsored by a bunch of big universities and stuff that is basically a feeling check-in that you can do and keep track of, what you're doing and how you're, to see so you can build patterns and so forth. And I've been using that for a few weeks now as well. And it's really, to increase emotional fluency, right?
Yeah.
To not just answer everything with fine or good or, right? If someone asks you how you're doing, see if they're really interested. Sometimes how you're doing is just saying hello. But if it's really asking how you're doing, to be okay to say it and to also recognize that we can feel lots of things at the same time. And there's not something bad. Like I found for myself, when I quit my job, I avoided the sadness. I was afraid. I was really afraid of the dark, deep water of this depression because I thought if I went into it, I might not ever come out. Right. And then, by the grace of God, I somehow got it that the only way out is through, right? Is to feel it and to dive into the cold, dark water and swim, even if it's underwater for a while in a cave and it's dark and I can't see. And let that come over me and then see what's out the other side, right? But to resist it is to have it get stuck in me and to get much, much worse place than to experience it and let it move through me.
Yeah. I think one of the most challenging moments for me was being able to express to my wife and to my kids that I'm really feeling badly. I'm really feeling sad. I'm really feeling, they're not used to that.
Yeah, for sure.
They're not used to hearing me say those things. And, they were super supportive, and it really gave me kind of permission to explore it and to be in it, as you said, swim in those dark waters. I like that. I'm going to steal that. Okay, Art?
Absolutely. You're welcome to. It's not trademarked. But once you had the courage, Michael, to admit to your wife and kids that you're not okay, What shifted, or what did you notice as soon as you had the courage to do that?
It really was kind of like that. The gate opened up for me to say, okay, what is this really about? Is this about money? No. Is this about identity? No. Is this about me wanting to be back, behind at the conference table? No. So I really kind of started asking those questions. And that's when I understood that it just, as I thought deeper and deeper about it, was this idea that, this thing, entity, family that I created is now gone.
Right.
And when I met it and I kind of shook hands with it and I kind of said, and I tried to embrace it,
Hmm.
and I said, well, that's the way it's supposed to be.
That's right.
And it made me think about that day of dropping my daughter off at college.
Hmm. It's difficult, but that's the way it's supposed to be.
Exactly.
And you can't stop
yeah,
it
right,
either, right?
right. Because the other alternative, for so many is to say, I'm just going to stay here forever. Right. I'm going to die at my desk. I'm going to leave the office horizontal.
And that becomes a clinging as well. It was interesting that you said, once I accepted it, then a gate opened up. And then I could problem solve in a sense. Then I could see it for what it is. Like when I was resisting it, what comes to my mind is I think about shame. Like if I'm ashamed of the feeling, if I'm resisting it and I'm stuck in shame, then I can't see it. There's nothing I can do about it because I'm just bad.
Mm.
There's just something wrong with me.
Mm-hmm.
And once you have that blanket statement, that's the difference between shame and guilt, right? Shame is I'm bad, guilt is I made a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
The big difference is that if I'm in shame, I can't do anything about it. There's no worth even trying. So if you're blocking it and resisting, and there's some shame about it, I'm not even allowed to express these feelings. I'm not allowed to feel these feelings. I'm a guy. I'm a tough guy. I'm an old guy, right? Then you're stuck. And it was interesting. You said as soon as you could acknowledge it to your family, this gate opened up, and then you could see it, and then you could problem solve it, and you could see what's really going on, and it opens up a lot of possibilities than just being stuck. So really powerful, and kudos to you for having the courage to open up to the people that are you're closest to, and you may also feel the most risk opening up to, because they, in our training, my training anyway, they need me to be strong and have all the answers or whatever, which of course is BS, but that's, a model or a thought that I subscribe to as well.
Yeah. And and I also have to say that the response that I got from so many men who subscribe to Chapter X, their responses to me as I bled out on the page was so giving and open and affirming and supportive. And that was, really, that provided a lot of juice, a lot of energy to be able to say, oh, okay, they get it.
Yeah.
They get it.
And I want to delve into that too for a minute, because the fear is that if we share what's really going on with us, that we'll be rejected. We'll be laughed out, that we won't have any friends. And from what you just shared, is the opposite was true, right?
Absolutely.
As you
Absolutely.
bled out on the page, as you showed your heart, as you showed the soft underside that someone could take a knife and stab, now your armor's not protecting it. It actually was met in kind, with other people saying, oh, wow, this guy's safe to be around. I can share what's going on with me too.
Exactly. And that's why I was very intentional about doing that. And I really thought about it. Like, do I want to be this vulnerable to that? I'm putting it out there. It is out in the universe. And I really sat with it for a while. And every signal in my body said, of course you must.
Mm.
Not you should, not maybe, not, you must.
Right.
Because that really was the whole impetus behind creating Chapter X, was this idea that, we all have tough times. We all have these moments of truth we all have these challenges that we are faced with, and we all need the courage to do it, to face these things. And I figured if I'm not going to do it, then I'm not being honest with all these people. And I want them to feel the same level of safety to confront their moments of truth.
Right.
And their fears and their depression and their concerns and their feeling of not being sure, of being, I don't know where to turn.
And this, Michael, was after you were already leading Chapter X and
Yeah.
I'm going to say it this way, supposedly having the answers,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so not only is this like potentially personal suicide, it's also potentially professional suicide.
Yeah.
In your new profession, if you will.
Well, I don't look at it as a profession, but
service.
Yeah. I mean, it's really
a new project, a new new passion.
Right. This is my passion project, and
right.
But in order for me to be, it's like, I stood the risk that, all these people who had subscribed and were, listening to the podcasts or reading my stuff or coming on to the monthly Zoom meetings, that no one was going to show up.
Right.
Right. People were going to unsubscribe in droves. And I was like, hey, listen, if I can't be authentic, if I can't be who I am in raw, miserable, upset, confused, in whatever state I'm in, then why am I doing this?
Right. Now, good for you for having that courage. What would you say is the biggest thing that you learned through that process?
I think the biggest thing I learned was to trust my inner voice, was to trust, to listen to it and to trust it, to cut off the noise that's coming from between my ears and listen to what my body is telling me. I think that was the biggest lesson. And it was a really big reminder, because it's one of those things that you can, if you don't actively keep reminding yourself that what your brain is telling you, which is to stay safe, stay in your comfort zone, stay within the quote unquote norm of society. Don't venture out because, you're going to get your head chopped off.
Right. Don't go out of the cave because someone's going to eat you.
Exactly. Don't open up the closet door because the monster's inside. Yeah, I think you have to constantly remind yourself that voice is just there. It's just kind of that maybe ancestral voice.
Yeah, that's amygdala speaking, right? Survival. Right?
Exactly. And that's not necessary. It's not the right tool right now.
Right.
Maybe if I was, walking in a dark jungle.
Right, that might be.
Right. Yeah. But other than that, you need to listen to something else and not what's going on, and being able to identify, where is this coming from? Is this coming from in my brain, or is there a conflict between my body and my brain? And what's speaking louder here?
And how do you determine that? Like, how did you answer that question? Like, how do you know where it's coming from? How do you know if you're acting out of fear or out of intuition or guidance or inner guidance or outer guidance, whichever the case is?
I like to walk. And when I walk, I like to just think and just allow, my body to be without the outside, world, without music, without other things interfering.
So you give yourself silence and space to listen and feel. And
exactly. And kind of check in. What's speaking to me now? And that constant process of, okay, well, this is what feels like it's speaking to me now. Is this true? How can I tell? So it's you need quiet. One of the things that we're really so bad at is taking the distractions out of our lives. Because, we are so distracted, the phone, the computer, the TV, whatever, there's no shortage of distractions.
Yeah.
And once we eliminate or we reduce those distractions, we then have the opportunity to really tune into ourselves.
Right.
And then be able to determine, where is this coming from? Is this my head? Is this my heart? Is this my gut? Is this my throat? Where am I feeling these feelings? these messages and where are they coming from? So it was really that, that process.
Right. No, so it starts by having some quiet time and letting the machine quiet down and have some space for something to percolate up.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's that's absolutely key. I had a podcast a few weeks ago. It was a solo one that I did when I made the experiment of no multitasking at all for a week. Zero. Like nothing. And it was horrible, lonely, and wonderful.
Yeah.
Peaceful, clarity, right? I lost 4 pounds right, in 1 week just by being present with my food instead of stuffing my face while I'm reading the Wall Street Journal or watching Sports Center or listening to a podcast, right? Is really amazing. So I think that's really true. And I had Lee Zlotoff on here on the podcast recently. He was the creator of MacGyver. And he said that's exactly how he, stumbled upon the creation and the continued production for MacGyver was he found the ideas coming to him when he's driving or when he was taking a shower. So he started doing that a lot. And then he realized it was just doing something to busy his mind with something else. So he would write the question on the whiteboard, what this episode I need to come up with in 5 minutes. Or 5 minutes, maybe he had 5 days because it's a weekly show. And he would, then he would build paper models just to keep his mind busy for 30 or 40 minutes. And then he would come back and write the answer. He wouldn't even think it. It would just come out on the whiteboard. All right. And every time he needed something, that's the way he did it, to tap into that inner guidance. So yeah, there's lots of tools, but it doesn't happen without some quiet time and some space.
For sure. And like I find, because I write 3 blog pieces a week for Chapter X, and I'm working on a novel, and I'm also in the beginning process of actually writing a book for Chapter X. And I find that my ideas happen either driving, shower, or when I turn the light off to go to bed.
Right.
And, and then, and I wear glasses. So I need to, if I'm going to write something down, I need to put my glasses on, turn the light on or whatever. I wind up, and I take my phone out and I'll tap my idea or my thought into the phone. And because if I don't put my glasses on, and when I look at what I typed out in the morning, I'm hysterical laughing because how it auto corrects and picks up things but I get the gem of the idea. But it is in the gems, the jewels, the gold is in those quiet times. We as a society, I used to be a news junkie, and watch the news. And I found like my cortisol levels, my sleep was out of whack because I was continually being like a caged tiger with all these thoughts of the things that are bumping up against my brain. And I said, you know what? I can't do this anymore. I need to separate from this because if I'm going to tap into my creative self, I need to reduce the cortisol levels and all that excitation that's all kind of external.
Right.
So that I can allow my ideas to flow.
This episode of the Life in Transition podcast is brought to you by Transition Mastery Coaching. If you have made it to midlife and you're successful and you are going through transitions in your life, in your business, in your career, or in your organization, and you are looking to master those transitions, to make the most of them, to accelerate into the next phase of your organization or your life. If you're facing challenges in your business, challenges in your relationship, challenges in your health, and you really want to transition those quickly, I'm here to guide you for that. And I look forward to working with you. And you can sign up for either Pinnacle Transition Coaching or Summit. Please go to lifeintransition.online/MLTM and scroll to see the Summit and Pinnacle Coaching, or reach out to me directly on my email, art@artblanchford.com. And I look forward to connecting with you and helping you to accelerate your transitions to achieve what it is that you want to achieve in the second half in your organization and in your life, so you can live your whole life with no regrets. If you hadn't made this transition, Michael, if you hadn't gone through this step of post-career and admitting the sadness, the depression that came with it, where do you think you would be now if you hadn't made that transition?
I don't know. You can, if you look at the statistics of depression in in older adults, it's staggering.
Yeah. Especially men.
Especially men. And it is, it wouldn't be surprising to say that that's where I would be. I would be a statistic. I remember years ago, pre-COVID, stopping at the local coffee shop on the way to work, and I used to see this group of men. Actually, I used to stop at this coffee. I used to do a lot of writing at the coffee shop. I wrote 2 books, and both of them at this same coffee shop at this particular table. And I used to see this group of men who I would hear all the time going, "I hate my life. Life is terrible. I wish I never retired." And I could just see myself as like this angry, sitting with this angry group of guys where they're wearing their, running track suits, miserable. And yeah, I mean, there's just so much misery in the world because it's like this self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, clinging to what was and then bitching about not having it. And even though it's not what you want anymore, it's not the way it's meant to be, but still fighting for it.
Yeah. And it's like, is that your legacy?
Right.
Is that how you envision, is that how you want to be remembered? Sitting around with a group of angry old guys wearing tracksuits at Starbucks? Right. I mean, is that really...
Right, that you worked your ass off your whole life so that you could be happy when you retired, and now you're just going to regret that you retired.
Right, exactly.
All right, instead of finding what's next.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you're not there. How has this transition that you've been through, you mentioned, sharing this with your wife and kids, how has it affected the key relationships in your life, Michael?
I'm blessed in that I have a wife and 2 kids who were very close. But I think that this was something that drew us even closer. Because I want them to see me not as like as far as my kids go, the Superman who comes, he can solve the problems, he can do this, he can do that, do anything but anything handy. I can't do anything handy, right? But
I can help you a little bit with that.
Yeah, beyond light bulbs, I'm done. I wanted them to see me as human, as because I want them to feel that they can, especially my son, to be able to say, yeah, I'm feeling kind of shattered, if that's how he's feeling.
Right.
And not
to
feel
be
that he has to live up to, oh, my dad was always, this tough as nails, blah, blah, blah. No, my dad was human.
Right. Right. And therefore it's okay for me to be human too.
Right. But I will add that, having 3 granddaughters is also a wonderful salve for sadness and depression.
Oh, absolutely. Congratulations on that, by the way. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Lots of hugs and lots of kisses. So
yeah, no, that's wonderful. If you could go back to your retiring self, this is the transition you put in. If you could go back now with what with the wisdom that you have now, Michael, what would you tell yourself as you're about this on the threshold of retirement or change, stopping your primary career?
I don't know that I would do anything differently, from the standpoint that this was a learning I needed. Okay. And if I was able to go back and say, hey, listen, you need to mourn the loss of your creation. I wouldn't have had that learning moment. I wouldn't have had that being able to share that with others. I wouldn't have had, to be able to go to my wife and my children. And so I don't know that I would have done anything different, Art. Because I think there was so much value to being able to bleed on the page for others, to allow them to see that it's okay.
Right.
To allow my family to see me as less than, strong and in command and in control.
So it's not that it's telling him to do anything different, but just to say, hey, it's going to be a bumpy ride and that's okay. Maybe.
I mean, yeah. I mean, I really didn't expect I really thought I had it nailed.
Right.
You know,
Right.
I mean, my professional work with clients and my own thinking about, because I had no issue with how am I going to fill my day?
Right.
After a 50-year hiatus, I was a classically trained trumpet player growing up. And after 50 years of the horn in the case, I picked it out again. And now I'm playing with an adult big band and having a blast.
That's awesome. That's awesome. What fun.
Yeah. So it's not, I do some volunteer work. I'm my writing, and I have a bunch of other hobbies that I'm engaged with, and other things that I want to explore. But so I don't have a lack.
Right.
I never had the lack of things that I had interest in.
Right. Right.
So I wasn't worried about that.
Right. About filling that space. Yeah.
Right. Like, how am I going to fill my day?
Right. That one never crossed your mind.
Right.
So, for anybody else that's coming up on the end of their career, if there's one tool or advice you could leave them with, they can hit pause right now on the podcast. They can leave a note in their to-do list on their phone or on a Post-it note if they're really old school. What would you leave them with? Like, what would you offer as a tool that anybody can apply right now if they're going through this big, post main career transition?
What I would say is, think about all the transitions you've gone through over your entire life's history. You went from novice to mastery, novice to mastery, novice to mastery in so many things, from crawling to walking,
right.
from being nonverbal to verbal, from not knowing an A from a Z or a 1 from a 2 to, all these different steps along the way where we had no knowing till we had mastery, till we understood things. And we've gone through all these transitions. Understand that it's a process, and that you can use that understanding of this is just another one, but you've got this accumulated experience to lean on. It's like, think of what were you like? Recreate your first day of work. Right? When you're on your first job. Where were you? You were anxious, you were curious, you were excited, you were all these things.
You're nervous.
You were afraid, you had all these things going on, and you had this desire to achieve, to reach mastery, to learn everything. Well, it's the same thing into this post-career chapter. You're going from mastery back to novice, but you've got all this experience behind you.
I love that. So to know that you've done it before many, many times.
Many
and to
times.
Accept that you are starting as a novice here, but you also have some wisdom and, like you said, a lot of dots to connect from all the times you've done it before to give you full confidence that you'll be able to do it again.
Exactly.
Yeah, I like that. I like that very much. That's a great message. Thank you. Thank you, Michael. Where can people find out more about you and Chapter X and the fun that you're playing with now and what you're doing now?
Well, they can come onto michaelfk.com, www.michaelfk.com, MICHAELFKAY, and they can subscribe to the blog and get the podcasts are all there, or they're on Spotify or Apple or all the places where podcasts are. And there's no cost. I don't charge anything for what I do. I have people going, well, why aren't you charging a subscription rate for your writings? I'm like, I don't want to.
Right. That's a good reason. That's a really good reason for a lot of things, right?
Right. I don't want to create a barrier. All the blog pieces are up on the website, and when you sign up, you just get added to the list and you get the announcements. And I do a monthly Zoom meeting that I limit to 15 people a month, because I don't want to have 80
so
people.
the people can interact. Yeah,
exactly. And I do that once a month for an hour, and people from all over the country come on, and sometimes we have 15, sometimes we have 8, whatever people. I figure whoever's supposed to be there is there.
Right.
No one is required to talk or share, but we just did our last discussion was on, do you still matter?
Mm. Mm.
And the discussion was wonderful.
Yeah, that's a deep question. Right?
Yeah. Do you still matter? We've had conversations about legacy. We've had conversations about, sometimes it's just like, what do you guys want to talk about? And someone will throw out a topic.
Right.
Yeah. So that's basically how people can find me. They can connect with me. If people are interested in doing a little coaching, I'm happy to engage with them on that level. Although I'm not looking to build a big coaching practice. I do it on kind of on a one-off basis. If someone's interested in having, or if someone wants just to have a conversation, we'll jump on Zoom and have a chat.
Well, Michael, I appreciate the vulnerability that you have to be honest about what's going on with you, and I can see how that also brings you to life, right? And that's the flip side of that coin of being able to feel your feelings and express them. That also makes us alive, makes us human. We're not repressing things and hiding things. So I really appreciate you being willing to share with me and with our listeners, and all the wisdom that you have gained and because of this vulnerability, have been willing to share with others. So thank you so much. And thank you for being a wonderful guest on the Life in Transition podcast. I can't wait to hear what action you are taking. Connect with me on LinkedIn or our website, lifeintransition.online, and let me know. Let a friend know too. It could be a huge encouragement to them and keep you on the track. Thank you so much for joining me today. Make sure you subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, and it would mean a lot to me if you left a review and shared this episode with a friend. If you want to learn more about me and what I do when I'm not podcasting, please visit me at artblanchford.com. Thank you for listening. Together, let's make the most of life in transition.